Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe 2015. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. Well, there were 7 billion other people it might have been, so I thought it might be helpful to narrow it down a bit for you. Well, as I've said before in September's gone by, it's the saddest time of the year for me because the Edinburgh Festival Fringe has now shut up shop for another year. And that in turn means it's as far away from the next Edinburgh Festival Fringe as it's possible to get. And as every year, that gives me an invigorating 8 or 9 days up in that fine city, enjoying the musical theatre that's on offer. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's indifferent. However, all of it adds up to a wonderful, intoxicating whole. And that's whole with a W. And also, as is traditional, I have themed up some of the interviews that I recorded whilst up in Edinburgh this year for the Fringe, so that there is at least some kind of golden thread discernible in the recordings you're going to hear. And today, the link is 3 shows, all of which started off-Broadway. They are Urinetown, Closer Than Ever, and Zanna Don't. 3 very different shows in their own way, and yet in Edinburgh they were all on this year, and in Edinburgh they were all excellent. And because of that, I had the great pleasure of talking to some of the people behind each of those 3 shows. And for no other reason than pure arbitrariness on my part, we're going to be listening to those 3 interviews in the order in which I conducted them, which is Urinetown, Closer Than Ever, and Zanna Don't. And of the 3 of those, we start with Urinetown, first written in 2001, so it's already 14 years old. It's really only started to make its mark in Britain in the last year or so. There was a production in London last year, and you may remember that we on Musical Talk have spoken about it before. But of course this year it was up in Edinburgh as part of the Royal Scottish Conservatoire's annual offering at the Festival Fringe. The show itself has music by Mark Holman and lyrics by Mark Holman and Gray Cotis, and it originally debuted at the New York International Fringe Festival. And so how appropriate that I should catch it at a totally different Fringe Festival, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. However, it's always been very well received. It won 3 Tonys in 2002, which is only a year after it was created, and it also won a Theatre World Award. And as I said, it came to London last year at the Apollo Theatre. I caught up with its director after being wowed by its Edinburgh production. So let's hear that interview, but please do note that we do discuss the plot, so there are such things as spoilers in the next few minutes. Musical Talk.
So my name's Ken Alexander. I'm the director of Urinetown, which is at the festival this year with the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, which is Scotland's main training body for actors, dancers and singers and musicians.
And always turns out brilliant performances of shows, usually quite interesting shows. Now, Urinetown falls very clearly into that category, an interesting show. Were you there when it was decided upon? How did Urinetown become the choice for this year?
Well, interestingly, it is a quirky but really interesting show at the same time. It's not. It kind of takes the form of a Broadway musical, but is anything but a conventional Broadway musical. It was chosen by Andrew Panton, who's the artistic director of the musical theatre programme at the Royal Conservatoire. I knew of the show and had been planning to see it when it was in London, but unfortunately the run didn't go as long as they'd hoped.
It was a short run in London.
That's right.
Running up to about Christmas.
Yeah, I believe
it
it was excellent, but it just didn't sustain. So I'd heard about the show but never seen it, and so Andrew sent me the script and the score to have a look at, and I just thought it was one of the most interesting things I'd seen recently. So I was delighted to take the job on.
Now, you've said something very interesting already, and forgive me as director, it seems to me that you've got the biggest hurdle to climb over when presented with this show as how are we going to do it. But you said, I thought rather interestingly, that it is both a conventional Broadway show and an anti-conventional Broadway show, or more or less.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's quite a difficult square to circle, isn't it? I mean, is it worth explaining briefly how that happens, and then how you thought, goodness, how are we going to do that?
Absolutely. Well, the show actually was never designed as a Broadway show. It was designed as a kind of fringe show in New York. The writers had come up with the idea and developed it, never thinking it would have kind of commercial legs. It was then picked up, taken on off Broadway, and then picked up again and taken on Broadway. Of course, it had a hugely successful run there. But for us, I mean, the interesting thing about it is it's a show basically about politics and human rights, and on top of that, kind of the sustainability of the way we use our resources on the earth, and the way capitalism works in terms of oppressing the poor, and what happens when you get freedom, and how do you use freedom responsibly. So it explores some really interesting political and dramatic issues, but at the same time they take the form of musical theatre to explore that story, and in fact musical comedy. Yes. That originally also gives it quite a different edge. But interestingly, what they do is they don't just take that simple idea and throw it together. They then explore what a musical is and what a musical does and how a musical is presented to an audience. And they parody throughout the show as many shows as you like, in a very gentle and kind of affectionate way, to explore the different dramatic points in the story. So it kind of touches on everything from West Side Story to Fiddler on the Roof to Les Miserables, a bit of Chicago in there. There's so many different shows that you can identify within it.
I was getting Charles Strauss notes in this one.
Yes, there's a little bit of Annie in there. The Hooverville chorus is almost evident.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and of course it kind of also plays on all those Depression musicals that came out of the 1930s, which were, people were looking for escapism and looking to transport themselves away from the reality of lives. So this takes elements of Annie, which looks at the Depression as well in America in the 1930s, and it places it in an unnamed and not necessarily a time-specific place. It could be any time, any town, anywhere.
In the future.
Yes, in the future. And so it has it looks a wee bit like an old-fashioned Broadway's Depression musical. It has a bit of Busby Berkeley in there.
It does, yes.
At the same time, it looks at a very contemporary musical on top of that. So it's a really interesting mix of styles, and finding ways to identify what they are and how we then interpret them to tell the story. So it's been fascinating to work on.
Well, as you also said, that sort of deconstructionist aspect where, to use that very popular word at the moment, it's a meta show as well as being a standard show. In that
yes,
sense,
and I think it was one of the first shows to really kind of explore that meta theatre thing, because I think it originated around about 1998, 99.
Oh, it's a real
fantasy
piece.
That's right, so it kind of has only emerged over here relatively recently, although it's been around in America for a while.
It's one of those ones where the CDs and the recordings have been known, like Name of Show was a few years ago.
Yes.
It's taken a while to sort of fall into the public consciousness, and the 25th annual Putnam Spelling Bee. All these things are sort of crept over from America, almost fully formed, because they've done all their development over there.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, a lot of people over here don't know it. People who are very interested in musical theatre do know it, but there's a very large number of the general public who don't know it at all. So it's been really interesting. In the first we're into our fourth show now. We've had a couple of previews. This was we're double cast, so this was the first show for one of the teams today. But it's interesting because you get people who know the show and love it, and they're coming because of that. You get people who are discovering it for the first time, and that's really fascinating to see.
Now, for you as director, we said a minute ago, there's there's a lot on your plate when that script lands on your doormat, isn't there? I mean, the fact we've spent this long describing it says there's something going on here. So, how easy is it for you to get a handle on the tone?
That has been one of the most challenging things of the whole show, and for the company to find that, because it is a very heightened style of playing.
It is rather.
In some ways it's quite cartoonish. It draws on vaudeville, it draws on silent movies, all these kind of forms of light entertainment that kind of have now become mainstream.
There's a lovely moment when during the denouement part where various people go, they shout, "What?" But they don't say the T, they go, "What?" And they all say in unison, as you say, exactly like a cartoon.
Yeah,
it's kind of
very high style. There's kind of almost a Tom and Jerry aspect to some of it, and that's been fun to play with. But we've had to really work to find that and find a consistent way of playing that across the show, because it's the thing that brings it to life and the thing that really engages the audience as well. But it's been fun to explore at the same time.
And during your initial thoughts, and then during the sort of the rehearsal and workshopping with your casts.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to me that you have this double cast, so you've got your work cut out twice.
Yes.
Did you find that you were re-pitching it? Did at any stage the pitch change, go up or down?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think the important thing is that for us, we wanted to find out what the truth of the story was. Start from a very real position of telling the story of these people and the very real things, what it means to actually be told, no, you can't pee unless you can afford to pee,
Yes.
and what that means, how that affects your health, how it affects your state of mind. And there's a line in it, what with all the nitrates making you crazy and all that.
Yes,
there's a lot of different things in there. And you have to find what that reality for the characters is in order to, and obviously for the rich characters in the play, they're skimming off the profits, but at the same time, the guy who's leading all that knows in his heart of hearts that this is the right thing to do. The fact that he's making a fast buck out of it doesn't assign neither up nor down to him. He thinks he's doing the right thing, and in fact he is, because he's controlling the limited water supply. So we had to find what the truth for both sides of the story was. That was our starting point, and then we had to grow it and magnify it and amplify it to find the style of the show.
And it's interesting as an audience how you are sort of moved in different directions, because obviously it starts off with the status quo, which is deemed or it's sold to you as a bad thing.
Yes.
And then you get the revolution, which is ultimately successful, although simplistic, and what that actually means, essentially the death of all the people in this town, and by extension perhaps further into the world.
Yeah.
As we're told, this drought's just getting worse and worse and spreading. But the speech marks the socialist revolution, and the first half it's played very firmly capitalism versus a gentle socialism.
That's right. Yeah.
Not Marxism, but a gentle the people, and that's all lovely, but it's
yes,
platitudinous, isn't it?
And I think very much, the show is geared that the audience take the side of the poor,
yes.
and that the other side is painted as pure evil. And then it becomes a bit more ambiguous and more conflicted as the story proceeds.
Well, at the end of Act 1, you actually outline that quite firmly as well in your costume design, because when you've got the good on one side of the stage and the bad, and I'm using speech marks here,
yes.
Because they're in their outer gear, the chap who owns the company was wearing a blue suit. He's wearing a black coat, and you're with the policeman, and they've got black jackets on, and there's a black apron on.
There's a lot of colour coding for shorthand there.
There is, exactly, but it looked really good because you had the you had the black on one side, and everyone else was beige. Actually, happens, wasn't it?
And in fact, our lighting designer has emphasised that further by giving a clean, cool light to the evil side and this kind of muddy, dirty light to the other side. So.
Well, that also sums up the politics in a strange way, doesn't it? Because it's marvellous. But once again, you've just touched on something I thought was very interesting, and it's the way of steering an audience through it from your point of view as a director. If a show is sufficiently pastiche, and this show is, because we do have these characters who come out from the drama every now and then and narrate, the policeman and little Sally, she's representative of the poor group, shall we say, and they come out and meet in this sort of neutral zone whilst
outside the show,
explaining to the public what's going on, the audience what's going on. So they are the meta part, and they're deconstructing as they go. And well, this is a musical.
That's right. There's a touch of Brecht in there and Kurt Weill as well.
It is Brechtian dissonance. Yes. Beautiful. What I find interesting, though, is for you, as I say, is how, if you're playing that up, if the thing is so pastiche and sending itself up and dislocating itself from a speech marks reality, how do you get the reality, which you also need to run in parallel? It has to have some core of truth.
Absolutely,
and
that's right.
How do you get an audience genuine to feel any kind of affection and sympathy for the central characters?
Yes, and in fact that's one of the real challenges of the show, because I think if it was all about just pastiche, it would be a sketch show.
Yes.
And this is the thing that we've had to work hardest with in the show, and why we wanted to start out from the truth of the characters, because if they're playing honestly, as long as that grain of honest truth is at the heart of the character, then I think it's possible to emotionally travel the journey with them. But I don't think you should necessarily. I think you should feel conflicted when you come out of the show, because they state right from the beginning, this is not a happy musical, although it's very funny.
It's bouncy, though. Yeah. It bounces all the way to the end.
Yes, that's right. And it won't send you out with a warm glow in terms of whatever the characters end up, but hopefully it will send you out with a sense of enjoyment about how you've got to that point.
I accept what you're saying, and it's all about the kernel of truth, and from that you can extrapolate emotions, even if they're in that slightly black and white sense of emotion.
Yes,
because the show
trades there's not a lot of subtlety in that colour, and that's very deliberate.
But do you? Well, it's difficult to say 4 shows in, but And people, I think, in the version we saw today, were engaged enough with the speech marks, the truth of the characters, and to have that sense of emotion. But the show doesn't help you, does it? Because even when you think, even when there's a period where there's speech mark sincerity for a while, it then comes along and kicks you in the teeth.
Yes.
Even with a knowing look or an arch comment or something.
Yeah.
And that is as much direction as well as the text, though, isn't it? So
it is. It's all everything that is there. It comes from the text, but I think it should definitely make you feel conflicted, and I think you should be questioning the characters that you've grown to love and like, and their actions and their motivations from both sides of the story. Although you might feel sadness that Bobby's gone, it won't break your heart. I don't think.
No.
It might break the heart of the characters within the show, because from the word go, you're made to sit outside the show and engage in the way that you do with a Brecht play. Sometimes, with Caucasian Chalk Circle, you can't help getting emotionally engaged, even though you're constantly reminded that this is a show in order to make a political point. And I think the same is very true of this show.
I like that very much, but it's such a difficult trick to pull off.
Yeah, and as you say, we're 4 shows in, so over the longer picture, it'll be interesting to see how that works with the audience.
So what have you drawn out of, bearing in mind today has been the first day of your other cast,
yeah.
What have you drawn from your audience reactions so far? Because the audience are obviously your ultimate critics and reviewers, aren't they?
Yes.
And they tell you immediately what they're thinking, because there they are
Well,
doing
it's
it.
very interesting, because you're getting people coming out who are saying, and I very deliberately kind of listen out for what people are saying, and engage with people, find out what they think. You're getting people who are coming out loving it because of the pastiche of the musicals. You're also getting people who are coming out because they really like the darker politics that are contained within it. So, and in many ways, for me, if we get both of those things, and some people that enjoy both of those things, then I'll be happy with that.
The musical theatre fans, let's talk pastiche now,
yes.
Shall we? And
yes.
you mentioned off the top of your head a whole bunch of things, whole type of shows and genres and individual composers. It takes no prisoners when it's raiding the chest of musical theatre, shall we say.
Yeah.
As a director, do you want to heighten that and play it up, or do you want to try and unify it as far as you can within the narrative drive that you're pressing? Because you could, this is a show where actually you are allowed to stand out, the performers are allowed to every now and then turn it off and say, well, hey, look what we're doing. Yeah. So you could do it that way. How did you want to do it? Well,
our first point, we worked very carefully with the musical directors, we worked very closely, musical directors and the choreographer, to look at why the writers had chosen a particular style of music to make a particular point within the journey of the story. So that became our starting point, is why they've chosen that, okay, and why is it important to use that style of music, and by doing it, what do we want to find? A good example of that would be Cladwell's first number, which is very much told in the traditional Tin Pan Alley form of musical theatre, Irving Berlin, Rodgers and Hart, Harry Warren, all these kind of characters. And the interpreters of those musicals, like Busby Berkeley, and so we're kind of thinking, okay, so why is that particular story told with that particular choice of music? And it's because Cladwell represents, in the world of the thing, the escapism for the elite, for those people who can afford not to worry about paying for water.
Which is exactly what happened in the 30s in those films, because all the heroes and central characters in 1930s musical films, for example, live in these gleaming white buildings.
Yes, let's gloss over that and forget about the real poor underneath. So obviously they've chosen that as a very particular style, and that we applied that kind of process to every number within the show, and then within that found hopefully what is a coherent style to the playing of the whole show, because it starts in the world of Kurt Weill. It's very very Berliner in the beginning, and of the show.
Weimarisch.
Yeah, completely. And by the time you then get to, and there's a bit of darker Candor and Ebb when you go into Privilege to Pee, which Pennywise sings, and then Cladwell suddenly is the third big number in the show. Suddenly erupts this Busby Berkeley style, and you think, oh right,
which
okay.
is a gentler tone as well, isn't it?
Yes,
it's actually veering because there is actually Candor and Ebb and Kurt Weill, there's a very direct line of family tree there.
Yes.
Which you wouldn't see so easily from that.
Yes.
30s. And 30s is the Rodgers and Hart, for want of a shorthand, is a different 1930s take, isn't it?
Yes, completely, because the heroine comes in like Peggy Sawyer from 42nd Street, and ends up more like Annie Oakley, or one of the more earthier musical heroes, or a bit of Mama Rose in there even as well. So it's very interesting. But with that one, there's a kind of veneer being applied over the top of the song, and hopefully with the setup through the two earlier songs, that veneer is apparent.
Yes. Oh well, I think the veneer is apparent almost all the way through. But it's easy to scratch a veneer, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's talk some more about some of the others. I mean, I'm so pleased you mentioned Hooverville from the stage version of Annie, because at the moment that particular song, the song which is, I won't say derived from it, but plays homage.
Yes.
Say.
Yes. There's about a 3 or 4 bar phrase which parodies specifically that song, and then it goes off into its own territory. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, how everything seems in a way to come back to the 1930s, because actually Annie is all about the depression of the 1930s. Now, do you think that's because they're trying to draw on that, the human misery of the 1930s and the post-crash depression, just sort of subliminally, or is it just that actually it's a lovely period of musical theatre that it's worth plundering?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest.
A little from column A, a little from column B.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting, because it was done in 1999, it has a slightly different resonance now, 16 years later, because actually what we've been going through politically in the last 5, 6, 7 years has been, has more resonance with what was happening in the 30s than it did when this show was first written. So we kind of
we're post-crash now, aren't we?
Yeah, and we explored that a little bit in our preparation and in the rehearsal process as well, as kind of finding what those resonances might be for some of the things that our own audience is experiencing as well.
So what was the biggest revelation for you?
Well, in terms of that that particular moment, I think particularly, having just gone through the election in the UK, and all the play that was made from both sides about responsibility for money and living within our means, and the media exploration of that whole process of the rich classes and the poor classes, and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, which is constantly in our headlines at the moment, and from different angles of the political spectrum. So those especially were the things that we enjoyed exploring in the rehearsal process.
But it isn't just single things together, is it? A good show, and that was a good show, then the production was brilliant. Is everything coming together? So there's choreography, there's lighting. I loved the lighting of the green and the blue gels, I still call them. I know they're not anymore, but which really gives you that kind of murky look. And your set design, which of course is a view from above over a lavatory.
Yes,
which
that's right.
turns, well, it's first of all, it's interesting, it's funny. When you're in an audience, you think, what is that? Oh, I realise what that is now. And then of course later on, there's the actual narrative symbolism of when people are dispatched to Urinetown. They are in fact thrown from a tall building down above, and the revelation is that the town itself is Urinetown.
Yeah.
So looking down upon a lavatory speaks to both those things. That is the sight you see. The revelation is before you die, which is that you're in Urinetown, is actually given to the audience in full view, without them realising what it is, perhaps until the end, or I suspect in some cases without realising it at all.
Yes, and in fact, because it could just look like a kind of disc and a platform, but it is, as you say, a toilet cistern on its back or looking from above. And when two of the characters in particular, when they die, they are flushed down the toilet. They're dispensed with. And again, it's one of the messages that one of the character has, is that everyone is dispensable. No, humanity doesn't matter. And again, that's something we explored in the design and the staging.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me about
Pleasure.
Urinetown, and thank you very much for putting it on and grappling with the difficulty. So all I had to do was sit there and enjoy it in the auditorium.
Yeah, the challenges have been a lot of fun, so we have really had a lot of fun exploring it.
Well, you've certainly surmounted all the problems, if I may say so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Musical talk. Well, there we are, Urinetown. I gave it 5 stars and called it quirky, sprightly and well worth seeing. The Royal Scottish Conservatoire normally turns up trumps, and this year was no different. And where else in the world of theatre are you going to see a lavatory lying on its back? But if that show's already showing its age by being 14 years old, the next one is slightly older again. In fact, it's 26. Because it started off-Broadway in 1989. It's Closer Than Ever by Richard Maltby Jr. and David Shire. And it is really a musical revue. It's a number of songs strung together which investigates, from all angles, by which I sometimes mean sideways views as well, the nature of love and life. Now, I must tell you, in the last few years I have heard the dread words song cycle used as an alternative to revue, R-E-V-U-E. And there is a difference, but the difference I've noticed mostly is in a lack of a sense of humour. When someone describes a show as a song cycle rather than a revue, they generally mean it's very serious, sometimes even po-faced. But Closer Than Ever is not one of those shows. It really is a revue. And it's very funny. It was described by its creators as a bookless book musical. It's unusual because it's really a series of sketches, which is what a revue is, with a song in each and no dialogue at all. And although it was written in 1989, it hasn't done that much else, except on the amateur circuit, although it was revived in 2012 and won an Outer Critics Best Off-Broadway Musical Award. But I was more delighted to see that it had come to Edinburgh this year, and with a rather splendid young cast. So I had the great pleasure of talking to the director and the musical director about this show and how it works with a cast of young people. And the answer, by the way, is very well, as you'll find out. Musical talk.
So my name is Christopher Gherkin, and I am the director of the company called Ophiuchus Rising, and we have brought this year to the Fringe a musical revue called Closer Than Ever by the composers Maltby and Shire.
My name is Jay Besh. I'm the music director of said Closer Than Ever for this production.
Well, let me start by asking about the piece, because it's an established piece, and they are established writers. It's described as 24 witty songs about life. 24 witty songs about life is what we got, but it's actually sort of a revue in the old-fashioned sense, or a song cycle rather than a musical. Does that cause any trouble for you?
It's an interesting thing. That most of the shows we brought to the Fringe in prior years have always been plot-based and had, an actual book story to them.
A narrative drive, as it were.
Exactly.
Yes, right.
This song cycle is very, very interesting in its way that each song itself is a story, but there are common threads throughout it. The challenge we had with this piece wasn't so much the individuality of all the different songs and making them pulling them out of a trunk and telling stories or weaving together a pattern of a mosaic of songs, was actually making the piece relatable to the age of my performers, because if you really listen to the lyrics, it's actually geared towards middle-aged. But
yes, I felt right at home listening, I must say.
We reincorporated it to be a little bit more multi-generational in terms of the staging and the things behind the messages behind the songs.
One of the really nice things about doing a review, though, is there isn't sort of a set style. We get to play pieces from all different genres of music. There was, it is very musical theater, but there's jazz, there's, ballad, there's up-tempo, there's vaudeville, there's lots of different styles of music. And we get to toy around with that and play with that. And so it's not limited in the sense of fitting the sort of sound concept of one show. We get to kind of push the envelope a little bit.
But would you say, I have to ask you this, is it like directing and musically directing one show, or is it like musically directing and directing 24 small shows?
I would have to say both.
Oh, good answer.
Absolutely. There are threads, both certainly musically and in terms of characterization and not quite plot, but there are threads that run through the entire thing.
There's absolutely golden threads.
Yeah, and it can be challenging to highlight those, but not sort of bang the audience over the head with them, to find that balance of bringing them out, but not being too obvious about it.
Having directed full-fledged musicals before, at home and here at the Fringe, in a way, directing a review-style show is a bit like music hall, yes. And so it makes it more fun. For the rehearsal process was much easier that way, because I didn't have to have the entire company at every single rehearsal.
Oh, indeed, yes, you can break it down. It's
so we can
in a different kind of blocking.
Exactly. So there are pros and cons to both of it, but it's fun, and it's a new it's a style that's not commonly seen on Broadway or in musical theater now anymore.
It really isn't.
It really isn't. So it's a nice jukebox sort of style musical that harkens back to, the mid-'80s with massive epic ballad songs and constant key changes. It screams 1984.
Well, that was a good year. I remember it well.
Me too.
But I must say, given that each of the songs tells its own story, it is, as you say, a story or a sketch in its own right, matching your excellent but exuberant cast to each part, how easy was that for you? And then how easy was it for you as musical director to then make sure that they, the symbiosis was correct, having been picked for each piece?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, the talent sort of just fell into place. We knew what we had. We heard what we had, and if they had the belt or this, it's got very much the traditional tenor, bass, alto, soprano formula, because it's written for 4 people, not.
Oh, is it really?
It's only written for 4 people.
It's scored for 4 voices
and
as
I
opposed
expanded to 16.
Well, it worked perfectly in that form, if I may say.
I think so.
Yeah.
That way you're not seeing the same people and hearing the same voices over and over and over.
And there was no sense of bloating either. I mean, it actually fitted your cast really well.
I thought it was pretty balanced.
Yeah,
now, we've not done the entire piece. We actually, we sparsed it down for the fringe specifically. And there were some pieces that probably would have been difficult to assign to our people, but,
Again, that's the advantage of doing a review type show, where it's easy if there's a number that isn't working out or you feel inhibits the flow of the show. It's not difficult to just sort of say, okay, we won't do that one.
It's modular enough to be able to excise
Exactly.
And we were able to do some interesting pieces with it. The Miss Bird song about the secretary living, her secret life. The scoring for it is just some keyboard and some drums. We decided to add. We had one of our producer, actually plays the saxophone. So a week before we came here, we said, why don't we make that a saxophone solo? And Jay wrote it. Yeah. And that version's never been done before, with the sax solo matching the vocalist.
I really like that, though. It gave it a sort of a strong resonance. I like the music, the marriage of the music with the lyrics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like that we had opportunity to get our instrumentalist on stage a little bit as well. And that's all credit to Christopher for doing that. But between Back on Bass and Miss Bird, by having a little bit of sort of that interaction, I think that's a really nice feel to it.
It was also nice watching your actor-musician, as they would be in that case, sort of then going back into the speech marks pit.
Absolutely, yeah.
When the bass player found out he had to act on stage, he was like, oh.
He was not quite comfortable in those shoes, but he really took to it, and it's really good.
Jazz cool.
He was
so you must feed that back.
Super jazz cool.
Yes.
He even wore a little stage makeup.
Oh my goodness. Well, we won't tell anyone. But here's my question, because some of the material is fairly adult, and it's a youthful cast. It's a mature youthful cast.
Absolutely.
But did that present you with any difficulties? I mean, they seem to be up for it. I mean, let's be honest. There's a certain amount of flesh. There's a certain amount of revelation. There's a gentleman's bottom is seen.
Right,
ladies and gentlemen.
Well, in the original production, when it's played by 50 and 60-year-olds, I don't think they show the rump of one of their tenors or the breasts
of one of their... Like a bad day in a butcher's window.
Exactly. So those are sort of things we made it a little fringy.
But edgy as well.
And edgy. And edgy.
Absolutely.
These performers are used to that kind of work. The last time we were here, we did Spring Awakening.
Oh, gosh, right, well.
And we did it full out.
They know what they're doing.
So they are well-rounded individuals.
Absolutely.
Also, though, if I may say, in a piece which is about love and relationships and sex, let's be honest, it's not always about love. Mm-hmm. It's quite, and it's a very good piece in terms of equality. The women have something to say, and there's a lot of good stuff about how stupid men are, as well as vice versa. It cuts both ways. It's actually a little bit nice to objectify the male rather than the female.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
That's one of the reasons we put him in a red jockstrap.
Yes, because there was a red bra later on as well.
Yes.
It's very clear that, naughty underwear is red.
Okay,
exactly. I've learnt a lot, thank you.
It's my favorite color.
Your witness?
It's his favorite color, too.
Yeah. No,
I think I've got red on right now.
But the listeners can't see that. Now we must talk about bringing it over to the Edinburgh Fringe. Had you done it in production? Well, tell me where you're from, and had you done it there and then brought it over, or is this a fresh production for Edinburgh?
We are from Washington, D.C., and a funny story is we actually had commissioned to do a completely different show.
Oh, really?
And then several weeks before we were supposed to come here, the licensing agent said, no, you can't have it anymore. Yeah. A more important company wants to do this show. So we struggled to...
How charming.
I know, it's lovely. So we had to go, okay, what are we going to do? We had to have a review-style cast, and I picked this. I had seen it about 15 or 20 years ago and liked the music so much, and I said we can make this work. So we prepared this specifically for Fringe, but we did perform it in Washington, D.C. 3 days before we traveled over. So.
And that was a challenge going through that change because we had auditioned the pit orchestra for the other show.
Yes.
And so we came in, and the score, this edition is scored for piano and bass.
Only.
And so our drummer, I sort of said, how do you feel about doing,
improvising?
Improvising, and he really took to it. He's a great guy named Colin, and did a wonderful job with it. And really, I mean, you can't tell that it's not scored.
It was absolutely seamless. Forgive me, this is a really good production of a really good show. I was delighted by it. I didn't know what I was going to get, really. I knew it by reputation, but not by seeing it. When I came in, and it's interesting when you had to do these little bits and pieces here and there, but actually you've brought it to life. It's exciting, exuberant. The music is done to perfection.
Thank you very much.
But also, I must say, I think the writers have done a fantastic job. Sometimes on a show like this, occasionally a lyric will be a bit wonky, perhaps, but it isn't. I think the lyrics are crisp and witty all the way through, and the music, the composer has met that equally.
Really brilliantly written.
It's a great
both book and score. It's just I love playing this music, and I love working with the pit to get this music up to the level that it needs to be. And it was a rehearsal process, and it took us time to get there, and it was so gratifying when you finally put all the puzzle pieces together and are able to really perform it and play it. It's just such a great feeling to do it justice.
I think the composers really had fun with this piece.
Yes,
because you look back at if you look in their history, we're looking at Les Mis, Miss Saigon, really, really heavy melodramas in terms of lyrics and music. And this is something charming and fun. And interestingly enough, they hated each other when they first met each other.
Did they really?
Maltby and Schreier did not get along. They went to school together.
A completely reverse of Gilbert and Sullivan.
Exactly. But they ended up doing some great things.
Yes,
and
they did.
I think the show is one of them.
Well, I know it's not. I was going to say because we all like Big as well. These are the great shows that no one you don't see as much as you should.
Yeah.
They've got a great pedigree, I think. What were the greatest challenges for you both? I bet they were rather different.
For me, it was making, like I said earlier, making the show, having such a young cast, making it relevant to them to understand what they're singing about.
Because although it's a review and songs only, there's no dialogue per se, it's still an acting role, isn't it?
It is completely an acting role. The song Patterns is really about, as written, as originally conceived, is about a woman starting to go into premature Alzheimer's.
Oh dear.
But I put it for a young girl suffering from bipolar and depression and some social anxieties. So fortunately, those lyrics were adaptable, but we had to find things within the human condition of these young people that they could relate to, regardless if they've experienced them or not. So that was challenging, but great fun too.
But it's also true for the audience, by the way, isn't it? Because,
Absolutely.
Forgive me, fingers crossed. I also haven't had that experience and hope not to. But we, so much of each story, each sketch, if we call it that way, has a relevance. And even if we haven't had those experiences, we know from television and film and radio what those experiences are like from our friends. It does talk to the everyman, even if you haven't had all the experiences. In fact, if you've had all the experiences, you've had a remarkable life.
I mean, everyone has felt some sort of loss or passion or love or desire or all of them.
Yes.
And we all have. And the goal that we set out to do is to evoke that from an audience member or to remember what it was like to, like the second song, to have a crush on somebody and
unreciprocated.
Exactly. Or be going crazy for someone, standing all night in the rain on a roof doing God knows what. to,
the musical side of stalking.
Exactly, to breaking up, and and the dating again thing was kind of fun too, to use social media and a bit of naughty texting.
Yes, yeah. You use projections very well.
Thank you.
Very nice. It's a sort of it's an odd word to use, but underscores the story that's going on in picture form.
Yes.
And what was the greatest challenge for you musically?
From
expanding it up.
The greatest challenge musically was actually getting all of our instrumentation and our own PA system from there to here. It was a technical challenge.
I was physical, logistical.
Yes, I was blessed to work with incredibly talented singers who, many of them came in on day one and it was ready. They really learned their music on their own, and it was a joy to work with them, and really talented musicians. But moving the logistics of getting we used our own PA system. We brought our own drum kit, our own basses. We did rent a keyboard here, but for the majority of it, getting it all from there to here, and to be able to set it up an entire pit orchestra in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Because that's we have
tonight
10,
it was 8.
Yeah, we had 8 minutes because we were running behind, and just to be able to think through a system that can be set up that quickly and that can be put on a plane and get it there and back again
people forget the logistics of musical theatre in all its forms, whether you're appearing in the Palladium or appearing in a nice venue like this, or in a small crypt room with 4 chairs
right,
and your 2 planks that aren't there, which we've all seen in Edinburgh.
Absolutely.
But every one of those experiences has so much invisible stuff behind it which you just never seen, which is why, forgive me, the people who wear the black clothing and the directors, the people who are invisible to the audience,
the
so
staff
much
we have over here. The production staff, the people in the dark, are larger than the pit and the people you see on stage. I have another 18 people upstairs.
Did you
putting
really?
it all together? Yep.
Between lights, sound, props,
media,
costumes,
props, everything, and just hauling the crap out of the of the loft up there into the little cubby down there.
Oh, is that where things are stored?
Yeah, everything's stored up there.
We've
all
got
the different
a
shows.
5x5 box that all of our gear fits into very tightly, and we come in and in 10 minutes it's down the stairs and set up and quick sound check, and we have house open.
A bit of stress makes it fun, though.
It does.
So, do you have a company website?
We have a Facebook page, and it's Ophiuchus Rising.
And you might want to spell that first.
I think. Ophiuchus is Ophiuchus. It's a new constellation they added a couple years ago.
Really?
Right. It's called Ophiuchus. So everybody's astrological chart went
I
off.
I
thought it would be
group
exactly,
of people,
but I also thought phonetically, if you say something, it might sound like something else.
yes, I can see what you're doing there. What a cheeky man you are.
Every now and then.
Splendid. And how long are you here in Edinburgh for?
We are only here until Monday,
Oh, such a pity.
but we'll be back next year. We have a new show.
I look forward to seeing it then.
Yes, Reefer Madness.
Oh, you know what it is already?
Yes, we're going to be doing Reefer Madness.
That's a bit 50s, isn't it?
It's set. Yes, it is 50s, but fun. We'll modernize that one too.
Yes. I'm looking forward to some good contemporary hula.
You,
I don't think I've ever used that sentence before. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
coming.
very
It
much.
was a wonderful show, highly enjoyable, and I wish you every great success for the future.
Great, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Musical talk. Well, there we are. Closer than ever. I gave that 4 stars, and I said a wonderful youthful cast impresses in this sparkling show. And so they did. And I caught up with 1 or 2 of the cast afterwards, quite by chance, on the Royal Mile, and had a very nice chat with them, and a very nice group of people they were as well, with a great sense of humour. But that had come out in the show itself. If you ever get the chance to see Closer Than Ever, really do give it a try. Very well worth it. And our final show today. Well, it takes us back to a show created in the 21st century, but once again only just. It's Zanna Don't, which is subtitled A Musical Fairy Tale. And it's written by Tim Aceto and Alexander Denilaris. Although I may not have pronounced those surnames correctly, my apologies. It started as an off-Broadway show in 2002, and first came to London in 2009. You may remember Musical Talk discussing it at the time. Like all the shows we've been discussing today, it has in its time won an award, in this case the Lucille Lortel Award for Outstanding Choreography. But it is a great show in all of its spheres, and I was lucky enough to catch a great production of it in Edinburgh. So let's listen now to the interview I conducted with Drew Gowland, the director, who was a marvellous man and who I would have liked to have spoken to for a lot longer, about Zanna Don't. Musical Talk.
I'm Drew Gowland. I'm the director and the producer of Zanna Don't at Sea Venues at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Now, this production of Zanna Don't is sparkling and intoxicating and hilarious and just a little bit heartbreaking. And so, frankly, it covers all the bases and is a brilliant production of a really enjoyable show.
Well, thank you very much.
How did you come to pick Zanna Don't?
4 months ago we picked the show. We picked the show for the MGA Academy of Performing Arts third-year students. So each year those students have to do 3 fully produced musicals. And Zanna Don't was their final musical of their graduating year.
Oh, it's their big finale.
Yes, well, it's not the big, huge finale. That was actually Spring Awakening at the King's Theatre. But
gosh, that's different.
A little different. We like to give them a broad experience in their third year. So we picked Zanna Don't as their final show as a year. So it was just the third year students. We produced it at the Festival Theatre studio space. We picked it because it was light-hearted, because it could be seen as a bit of good fun, but also had a huge heart right at the very end. And so for them, for the students' experience, it was great for them to have to deal with what it was like to do something that at first seems very easy and trivial, but actually to make sure that at the end it became as heartbreaking as you said it was. But of course it's a 2-hour piece.
Originally, yes, absolutely. It's an off-Broadway show.
Off-Broadway show, yep. It wasn't completely well received off-Broadway, but it lasted a long time, so there was definitely something there. The audiences were liking it, but I don't think the critics were. And then we took the 2-hour piece, contacted Sea Venues here at the Edinburgh Fringe and said, do you know what, I think we have something a bit special here, something that would suit the Fringe.
So do I.
But then, of course, the task came of reducing it to the audience.
Which is the heartbreaking part in many shows, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I have to be honest, I prefer this version. So I'm quite pleased. It took a long time, and we had to be very careful when we were cutting it down from a 2-act with an interval, 2-hour show, into an hour and 20 minutes. But I hope, and I think, and I personally believe we have managed to keep everything that was marvellous.
There are no obvious omissions in plot. The plot carries through, there's no trapdoors, there's nothing assumed, so everything is there, all the points are there.
Yep.
But also, if I may say, the pace is fantastic, and that I imagine is also one of the benefits.
I think that's why I prefer this version, because it just zips along.
Yeah.
You don't have time, and before you know it, whack, we hit you with that final scene, and you go, oh, my goodness. So I think, I'm very pleased with it as a cut-down version. I think actually, don't tell the writers. I think they might be furious with me, but I think that this version of it is actually stronger.
It's a good travel version, shall we say?
Yeah, it could go on tour, couldn't it?
It's for the back of the car.
Yeah, you can put it in a boot and take it off anywhere you like.
Now, I don't know, I'm sure our listeners will have heard of Zanna Don't, but it is in its own way a satirical piece because it inverts society, particularly in relation to gender politics. I mean, that would be the theoretical way of describing it. Not so thrilling when you put it that way.
Doesn't sell tickets, that version, but that's exactly what it is.
But without going too much into it, it is a gay world into which heterosexuals arrive, shall we say.
Yes.
And from that we see how society deals with that. That is, and of course it is the reflection of the current society through a distorting mirror, which is one of the ways of getting satire.
Yeah.
But it also has this very odd, it seems there's an odd dichotomy in it in one sense, which I think is its strength. But it's also quite naive, or it pretends to be naive for about at least 3/4 of itself. The unwary audience might think that that all they're seeing is all there is, but then at the end that changes. But that's quite difficult, isn't it, to be satirical and naive? How are you able to address that as director?
That was the hardest thing in rehearsals. The cast would look at me and say, I don't get this. I don't understand. The cast would look at me and say things like, this doesn't make any sense. And I found myself as a director, and this is probably the worst thing a director could ever say, is just say it. Because I know it doesn't make sense. I know if you think about it too much, guys, you know it fundamentally doesn't make any sense. You have to see the piece as a whole. What's the word? As one, you have to see it as in its entirety to understand it. If you take out holistic, that's the word. Thank you so much. You have to see the piece holistically, because if you take one character or one storyline or one plot development, you can see that actually it doesn't stand up. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow any kind of logical explanation. And you go, why are these characters doing these things? However, when you put it all together, and I think this is why sometimes when you see it or an audience sees it, if it's badly done, the writers can come across as idiots, poor writers, because actually they're very clever. It's very cleverly put together. How do you deal with it in a rehearsal room as a director? You have to have a good cast. And you have to have a cast that trust you, and you have to have a cast that are willing just to let it run its course, see where it leads you, and then when you arrive, you go, oh, now I understand.
It's landed.
Yeah, it's landed. And you see it in the audience. They kind of fidget. You can see them going, and in the first opening scene, you can see a few of them looking at each other thinking, what have we done? Oh my goodness, am I sat at the end of the row? Can I escape this if I don't like it? And then by the end, they're on their feet. So.
Well, I think the audience bought into Dave very, very quickly. I think that they were, to me, they seemed a very theatrical, stagey audience, I must say.
Welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe.
Yes. There's a sense of knowing, isn't there? But it is an interesting balance, I think, and I love the fact that actually it deceptively takes you to its conclusion. It isn't obvious where it's going. It's certainly not clear how it's going to pay off. And I think the fact that you've managed to keep that balance ticking over is a testament to you and to your cast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it really is. Now, let's talk about your approach to it yourself. Obviously, you fell in love with the piece yourself. You saw it a few years ago.
Well, I saw it a few years ago and I did not fall in love with it. Then I was looking for something that was suitable, and I picked up the script and at first I thought, I'm not really sure that I'm really sure what this is about, because, as a director, when you look at a piece and you're thinking, what am I going to do with it? I thought, gosh, as my actors did on the first read-through, I don't know what this is about. I don't know how this works.
I imagine on the printed page it's harder to get across than it is on the stage.
Oh, it's like a piece of Shakespeare.
Yes.
You look at it and you think, I have no idea what on earth is being said. Why are they saying this? Why real people don't do this. I think that's what people kept saying to me in the rehearsal process. But real people don't behave like this, and then you realise you're not dealing with real people.
No.
You're dealing with a mirrored image and a heightened version of that mirrored image. So I loved it. I loved every moment of it. But you do have to trust that you just let it flow, and with good creative actors. And I was blessed.
Yes.
I mean, it's very easy for me to sit here and go, oh, yes, I'm the director. I'm the genius behind what you just saw. Oh, whatever.
Let me say that. I think you're the genius behind what I just saw.
Well, thank you so much. However, no, I can't take credit for this. That cast is outstanding. Young performers willing to make absolutely any decision. They would, anything I asked them to do, they would do it at 100%. Yeah, my cast are outstanding. Creative, fun to work with, so giving to one another. And to find that in 18, 19, 20-year-old performers who are able to play these characters so beautifully, because they are these characters, they are the right age.
Yeah, they're not acting up or acting down. This is their generation, is it not?
Yeah, it's absolutely their generation, albeit they're from Edinburgh, most of them, and they're playing American high school kids.
That's acting, darling.
That's acting. And also, we know, in the UK, we know, don't we? We know what American high schools are like. That's what every film is about, almost.
Many of the musicals are perhaps even named after that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The enigma of the gnomic comments.
I found one of my cast on the Royal Mile yesterday describing it as a mix between High School Musical, Grease, and a gay rights activist. And I said, well, do you know what? Carry on. If that's what's selling if that's what's selling it to the audience, then that's fine. You can go for that. I agree with it. So
now, as you say, the relationship between the cast and themselves and you as a director has to be about trust, and you said that trust was sort of paramount here, and that really works. Now, although the show is sort of strangely naive, or at least so it appears, there is actually a lot being asked of the actors. I don't just mean in the theatrical world, because it's satirical, or has at least had that role. There is an element of playing up to the stereotypes of both gay men and women and straight men and women, because that is the currency of the piece. And so you have, forgive me, you have a member of the cast who's strips to his pants and thinks that he's not attractive. So that's an interesting dichotomy again. But also actually asking an actor to strip to his pants in front of an audience is a fairly strong thing. You have people kissing, same gender kissing, different gender kissing. Now, of course, I'm pleased to say that here in 2015 we now live in a very much more liberal environment, and actually in theatre it's more liberal again, and so there's very little, I hope, concern and worry about that. But I suppose the question I've got are these areas still cause any trouble in terms of trust, or actually is the trust entirely different? Is it more theatrical? That ensemble trust that needs to develop?
Honestly, I think the world is a different place now, and
to even when this musical was written.
Oh yes. Oh yes. In the last 3 or 4 years, I have seen a shift in young people, where the boundaries that I had have been pushed, and the boundaries.
Hear from my exalted old age.
No, I don't. Listen to me. I sound like I'm 90, don't I? And I'm not at all. I'm 34. But even the difference between how I was at their age and how they are now, and how their older brothers and sisters were, even in the last few years, there have been massive changes in where young people's boundaries are, what they're willing to accept from themselves and from each other. And
the paradigm has changed, essentially, hasn't it, socially?
Utterly changed. It's unrecognisable now. And so I think that the issues that are being dealt with in this musical, I think they understand them, but I don't think they personally have them.
No, I agree.
And also I'm extremely lucky. These young people have been working with me for a long time. So going into a rehearsal period with somebody who you've known, for example, Thomas, who is the very handsome young man who has to strip in the locker room for Zanna's band. Steve, quarterback. That's Thomas Doherty. He's just signed with Olivia Bell Management in London, actually, so he's done extremely well. He's just graduated our 3-year musical theatre course.
They saw something in they wanted to get hold of.
Yeah, they did. They definitely saw something, yes. They were very quick to snap that one up. So they now have Thomas, but I've been teaching him since he was 13.
So it's a different relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, and so I said, you know what, you've graduated now, we're producing this show, I would like you to take the lead. He didn't even bat an eyelid when I said, there's a locker room scene, and for Mike's benefit, you are going to have to take your clothes off, Thomas. He was like, oh, absolutely no problem at all.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that, yes. And of course, like you say, he's a very handsome young man who clearly looks after himself and spends more time in the gym than he should. So I don't think he minded at all.
Not wishing to be too vulgar, but you could grate cheese on him.
Now, he's too recently a student of mine to talk about him like that, but yes, absolutely, yeah.
But let's not just pick him out. The rest of your cast are fantastic. Your Zanna is sort of born for the role, I should say. Zanna is such a soft, lovable character. But actually, let's talk about the character and the actor, because actually, once again, there's more to this character than meets the eye. At the beginning, it's made plain through others that he is lonely, but he won't acknowledge it.
Yes.
And at the beginning, he's told not to interfere in the relationship between Steve and the chess master, who's the sort of hunk of the school in this sort of world. And he does. And so you could argue that the whole thing, the sadness that comes to him, is a creation of his own interference. And then, of course, at the very end of the story, his sort of torch song is based on Dickens' phrase about it's a far, far greater thing I do, where he sort of gives up the happy world he's in.
For the benefit of everybody else.
So, actually, once again, you have this character who's sort of sweet and soft and gentle, but actually it is a tragic arc.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
devastating.
It is, and the actor brings that forth. At the end, the heartbreak comes from Zanna's position. And the actor's eyes alone, let alone everything else, he really brings that to life. I think you could hear the audience feel for him. The hearts were breaking across the room. So your Zanna was able to address that very marvellously. I think that's a real skill to the acting, because it's a musical, but the acting is actually so much an important part of this musical.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack is a beautiful actor. He's been working extremely hard. And like I said to you at the beginning, I think he absolutely understands what his role was in this musical. He completely understands what it feels like to be the lonely one, to be the one who everybody looks at for help and a little bit of encouragement when they're feeling down. And that can take its toll on a young person. And that's what Zanna's feeling all the way through this. He's masking his own feelings by helping everybody else fulfill their desires.
It's the Samaritan who doesn't realise what their own situation is.
Absolutely, yeah. And then his final good deed does indeed go punished. A good deed goes unpunished, as it were, as they say. So, and he finds himself basically all living in the world that we live in now, or at least the world that the writers lived in when they wrote this piece. But it's a world that we still understand, because it's very easy when you're at the Edinburgh Fringe, surrounded by like-minded people, having a fabulous artistic time, working in theatre. It's very easy to think that the world is easier for the Zannas of our world than it actually is. And there are still massive pockets of society where this show would not be well accepted.
Couldn't agree more.
And I think you can look at it and think, gosh, you know, oh, it's lovely, but it's of its time. Well, no, it's not. It's still of this time.
Its time perhaps may pass, but we're not there yet.
Its time will definitely pass.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope so
Same
anyway.
here.
And the quicker the better. Thank you very much. However, until that time has passed, Zanna will always have a place in a theatre somewhere. And I have seen young people leaving this theatre space with a different look to the look they had when they went in. And so Theatre for Social Change is not gone just yet. I'm very pleased with the work that the students and the cast are doing.
Well, there's a lovely self-referential piece in the play anyway, isn't there, where they actually say, if musical theatre isn't for addressing important social issues, what is it for? And actually that gets a laugh, because obviously that's counter to the popular view, but actually drama and musical theatre is nothing more than drama. Has that power and still does have that responsibility.
We've just witnessed it.
Yes,
we've just witnessed an hour and 25 minutes of social change. They didn't know it was happening, but it was. And for some, the change is small. For others, for some of the parents of the cast, it's a massive change. And you know, hats off to the cast for that. I mean, it's just outrageously good, the work that they're doing. Not only are they talented musical theatre performers, they're also doing an amazing job at educating some people who maybe weren't ready to be educated, maybe didn't realise they were being educated, and that's the joy of it.
But it's the gentle tickle of education, isn't it, rather than a sledgehammer?
Absolutely. There's no lecturing going on. It's, you know, there's no lecture in Zanna. There's nothing.
I should say this. Part of that naivete, however, is that it is, you know, it talks about love a lot, and it is about love, and it isn't actually about sex or carnality. And you can say that's the naive level of it, but in a way, do you consider? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. But that kind of almost neutered nature makes it easier to swallow in order to make the story palatable. Is it an accessibility thing, do you think?
Absolutely, I think so. I definitely think that's what the writers had in mind. It's very easy to watch. There are no boundaries that are pushed too far. And I'll be honest, when we were bringing it to the Fringe, I had a conversation with the creative team and I said, do we need to make this sexier for the Fringe? Yes. Do we need to? And I think we have. I think I got into trouble from one reviewer saying I had made it too sexual.
Sexual or sexy? Because actually there's a difference.
There is a difference. I think there's
One
a difference.
Chest does not make a swallow.
Well, I would agree with you.
My metaphors again.
Lovely. I would agree with you. I think that no, it's definitely not about sex. No, and if it were, it would be harder to watch and harder. I think people would find it harder to enjoy, especially those who would usually take issue with that kind of material. And so I think they've avoided it on purpose. I have, of course, taken advantage of the moments where it can be a little bit naughty, a little bit raunchier than it maybe needs to be.
Well, the wand is a great thing there, but it's very much, you know, the wand could be, in some people's minds, interpreted.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're an innocent man and you go straight back to the monastery when we finished, I know. But that's actually, I think that's intrinsically in the text anyway, or at least it's allowable. And also, you as director have brought that out in a way that can only be described in British pantomime terms. It's a little piece of double entendre for you to pick up if you want it.
And absolutely, it's hidden quite well. But if you see it, you see it, and you'll either enjoy it or you won't. And you can absolutely feel completely at ease with ignoring it if you've noticed it. But I think that. It's high school children, it's high school kids, and I think you need to bear that in mind when you're directing it and when you're performing it. It doesn't need to be sexy.
No, it doesn't.
But it is at times.
It's also charming, which just gilds the lily as well. I mean, that's the point. Can I talk about some of your directorial choices, which I think are fantastic? I mean, just even simple things like the fact in Zanna's original world, everything is brightly coloured. You even have sort of rainbow chairs, bright colours, and then as we transform into the, shall we call speech marks real life, for want of a better phrase, the shorthand, it is a black and white world. And black and white also isn't just a colour scheme, it actually suggests a way of thinking. That is, we're going to the straight and narrow, if you like. I like that. There's also, and this is really amazing, I think, given the constraints and the fact you'll have to borrow and share lighting with 400 other shows using the same venue 10 minutes after and 10 minutes before
course.
you. But there's a lovely spot on Zanna when he sings his sort of Dickens number, I want to call it, his torch number.
I understand.
And that harshness also, first of all, highlights him, but it's a harsh light, a harsh white light in a dark black box, really, theatre, which actually shows the world into which he's about to land or has landed. There's a lot of really nice little directorial choices which I think are sweet, subtle and just delicious.
Well, thank you very much. They're probably the most expensive choices I've ever made on production. Yeah, well, we brought everything in ourselves. So I realised that part of the storytelling in this piece requires careful pinpointing of the audience's attention. In a black studio space, it's very difficult to do that. So
it does absorb, doesn't it, black?
Yeah, and it doesn't help as a director when you're directing theatre. You have to be mindful that you can't move your camera. You can't tell the audience where to. You can't point to them and say, please look over here now. And so I did bring in a lot of technical equipment to help me, and I hope it was subtle enough, but I do think it was super important that we could create those two worlds. When the spell has happened and we return to the world as we know it now, I needed, it was an absolute requirement that I could point that out to everybody.
A good delineation.
Thank you, I needed that, and so you can only do that in that kind of space with the clever use of light, and of course the clever use of costuming. And I think you'll note there was no black or white in the first section.
No, not at all.
None. Nobody
Barely
was
a
allowed
shoelace.
it. Absolutely not. All shoelaces were replaced. And so there was no white or black. And then, of course, you go into the world as we know it now, and it's black and white. And that's not to say disinteresting. It wasn't for me to say there's anything wrong with that. It was just trying to explain that if you are closed-minded, if you are not open-minded and able to see the world properly, you do miss all of the shades.
Yes.
And so the black and white was super important to me. Equally was the quick change back into colour to send you all back out.
Yes.
Of the,
Indeed, the walk down, as it were.
Yeah, the walk down, the panto walk down, as it were. I couldn't resist it. So
it does fit.
Well, thank you very much.
And it's not in any. I don't think it's in any way self-indulgent. I would fight that if anyone were to say it. I think it's absolutely essential.
Well, it's 100% essential.
And I think the audience need it as well.
Yeah, and they enjoy it.
Yeah.
I can see it from them. You have this moment of darkness in the prom, in the world that we view it as at the moment. You have this moment of darkness in this black and white, closed-minded, straight way of thinking, excuse the pun. Yeah. and then I thought it was extremely important that I sent them back out into the fringe from the world that I would like them to go into. And so I did require my costume department and my cast to get changed extremely quickly in the wings for that. So I think they had about 25 seconds. But the difference it makes to the audiences, what's the word? The atmosphere within the auditorium towards the end.
Well, this is what people forget about theatre. It's a sensory experience.
Yeah.
And senses have to be fed. They don't
course.
we can live on our intellect, and I love to do so, but I do want a bit of food for the
So-
eyes, the ears, the nose, the...
Well, I hope I sent them away with something sweet at the very end. So.
And by the way, when Zanna comes on wearing his, I would have to call it pink and crust plum suit.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'd like one, please.
You'd like one?
I don't know whose tailor
You
it
can
is.
speak to my costumer. They'll make you one, no problem at all.
Now, how can people see Zanna, which I recommend they do because it's a 5-star show?
Thank you very much. They can see it by contacting the box office at C venues or the Edinburgh Fringe box office. We're at the main C venue on Chambers Street. We're playing the entire Fringe up until the 30th every night. We play at 7:30, and we're in C+3, which is the lovely space, about 150-seat auditorium up at the top of the building.
It's exactly the right size for the show.
Yeah, it is. It is perfect. It's definitely a studio piece.
And the organisation that has presented this, it's called...
We are from, essentially the cast are all students of the MGA Academy of Performing Arts. They're a mixture of first year, second year, third year and graduating students of their musical theatre course, which is, it's an independent private college in Edinburgh doing HNDs, diploma courses in acting or dancing or musical theatre. These happen to be the musical theatre students. The show is produced at the Fringe by Beyond Broadway Productions, which is a professional production company who decided to have a look at Zanna Don't saw it at the Edinburgh Festival Theatre as it was done as part of their college course, decided that it was fringe-worthy, took the cast, spoke to the MGA Academy and said, can we have it please? Produced it here for C Venues and it's a hit. So actually the entire cast are on a professional contract.
Fantastic. Well, forgive me, they are professional.
Well, thank you very much.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But some people might be wanting to contact you, Drew, because, forgive me, you're a sensitive, intelligent, fantastic director.
Oh, thank you very much. That's lovely. They're very welcome to contact me. They can contact me basically by calling the MGA Academy of Performing Arts. They can call that's on 0131 466 9392. I'm very happy also for them to email the Academy, which is info@themgaacademy.com. Or they can check out our website and have a look at what else we do, which is www.themgaacademy.com. And I would love to hear from anybody who wants to get involved with the Academy, who wants to get involved with me as a director, or the choreographer, Mr. Murray Grant, or of course the musical director, Greg. We're a creative team that work all over the place, so they're very welcome to contact me should they wish.
Well, let me just finish this by saying this was a fantastic show with a fantastic cast and a fantastic director and team, and I hope to see much more of your work in the future, both here in the Fringe and elsewhere.
I can't thank you enough. That's lovely. What a great review. Can't ask for more than that.
Well, in fairness, you did all the work.
No, my cast did all the work. Thank you.
Musical talk. Well, there we are. Drew Gowland there. I reviewed that as hilarious and intoxicating and gave it 5 stars, and it deserved every single one of them. An amazing cast as well, but there was a great deal of originality and colour and brightness and verve and brio that went into the entire production. I think I've used up most of the adjectives I'm going to use there, but you get the idea. I liked it. Well, that just about wraps it up for this week's edition of Musical Talk. I hope you've enjoyed listening to these off-Broadway shows which have been on Edinburgh this year at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Plenty more discussions and conversations to be had from Musical Talk over the next few weeks about the various things that could have been seen in Edinburgh this year, all of which are very different in each case. So there's lots of variety coming up, and I hope today's episode has whetted your appetite for the future. If it has, join me again next time, and we'll do more of the same, but with different words. And if you didn't like it, may I refer you to my previous answer? I'm using different words. If you didn't like it this time, you'll like it next time. Surely, you can't be that difficult to please. Anyway, time for me to say goodbye. Oh, I've missed that time. Let's see if I can have a second go at it. Goodbye. There we are, nailed it. This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2015. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on the latter, you can do so at Musical Talk Thos.
Fantastic show, by the way. I was here last night, very much enjoyed it. I had the pleasure of talking to your director, so thank you.
Yes, you're the reviewer.
I was the reviewer.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, you did all the work, really, didn't you?
Is there any place that we can find your review online as well?
Yes,
I'm the webmaster producer.
Oh, splendid, yes. It's an audio recording.
Right.
So, let me give you a copy of my card.
Oh, thank you so
Not
much.
just a copy, an actual card. There we are.
Incredible.
We're on iTunes as well.
Okay,
So we're on
wonderful.
iTunes, free subscribing. That's our streaming website. And if you type Musical Talk and Weebly, you'll find our downloadable website, which has got all our back catalogue on as well.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I explained to your director, Chris. I call him Chris. I'm sure you call him.
No, we call him Chris.
Mr.
Christopher.
I explained that next Tuesday, we go out once a week on Tuesday. Next Tuesday's episode will have a section of the interview with him and your musical director.
Jay,
that's right,
yes.
thank you. Because next week's episode is about here are the shows which are still on, go and see them.
Yeah.
I don't know, when do you finish?
Tonight,
Oh,
actually.
in which case yours won't be in that. But I was going to say then the full episode, then over the course of the next few weeks, all the complete interviews or interviews which I can't use because the shows are closed will be broadcast after that. So I'm expecting the next 4, 5, 6 weeks.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Honestly, the show was fantastic.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Forgive me. The gentleman who's wearing the red jockstrap, you must feed back to him that there were ladies in my row who were very keen.
That's his roommate.
Yeah.
That's his roommate.
A sharp intake of breath occurred, I can assure you.
And I was on the other side just wearing the underwear.
Yeah.
You were the gentleman in the blue box.
Yeah.
Well, it could have been for you. But, so there's something a little bit startling about well,
that's what we
the
were
right
going
number
for.
of buttocks. Anyone with 3 buttocks gets twice as much attention, of course. But that's well, we're talking something else there, right? Anyway, lovely, well done.
Thank you so much.
Closing tonight. I'm so sorry. And when do you fly out? Fairly rapidly, isn't it?
We leave here 3 a.m. Monday morning. So we're gonna have a fun night tomorrow.
Well,
all right, I'm
you'll
very
sleep on
glad
the journey.
you enjoyed
Anyway,
it.
lovely to meet you all, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much.